It was a charming old house. We loved exploring its dusty corners and climbing the apple tree in the backyard. But our favorite thing was the ghost. Happy October, my dear guests. We all know Halloween is approaching. Being a barkeep and a sorceress amidst the wild forests, I get my share of spooky stories, whether it comes from my patrons, guests, or personal adventures. I thought this month is a perfect occasion to share those stories with you. Prepare yourselves, though. You might not be able to sleep afterwards. The Witcher. Alright now, this story may be extra spooky and not fit for children. This story I heard from a witcher named Eldred. He was passing by my tavern for a drink before his next monster slaying gig. Before he became a witcher, as a young boy around 4 years of age, he was sleeping in his family hut on a usual night. Suddenly, he heard footsteps outside his door. He peeked out of his eyes to see what was happening. His door swung open quietly to reveal a man carrying the corpses of his parents. After silently propping them up on a chair, he wrote something on the wall in the blood of the dead bodies. He then hid under Eldred's bed. Eldred was scared beyond belief. He couldn't read the writing on the wall, and he knew the man was under his bed. Like any child, he pretended that he was asleep through the whole thing and hasn't awoken yet. Hearing the breaths from under his bed, he laid as still as the bodies on the chair in his room. An hour passed, and his eyes started adjusting more and more to the darkness. He tried to make out the words, and he finally read the sentence.
I know you're awake.
He felt something shift underneath his bed. The chair. As some of you may know, I have a sister. Well, had a sister. She died in the war. Her name was Raven. When Raven and I were kids, for some time we lived at an abandoned house in the Ghost Valley. It was a charming old house. We loved exploring its dusty corners and climbing the apple tree in the backyard. But our favorite thing was the ghost. We called her Mother because she seemed so kind and nurturing, and well, we lost our parents before Raven could even walk. Some mornings Raven and I would wake up, and on each of our nightstands we'd find a cup that hadn't been there the night before. Mother had left them there. She was worried that we'd get thirsty during the night. Among the home's original furnishings was an antique wooden chair which we kept against the back wall of the living room. Whenever we were preoccupied, playing a game or practicing magic, Mother would inch that chair forward across the room towards us. Sometimes she'd manage to move it all the way to the center of the room. We always felt sad putting it back against the wall. Mother just wanted to be near us. Years later, we'd moved out and found our own little hut within one of the Elven villages. I told the story of the old house Raven and I found our escape in to one of our trusted friends in the village. To our surprise, the old house was quite famous, and its story way less sweet than Raven and I had thought. Its original occupant was a widow. She'd murdered her two children by giving them each a cup of poisoned milk before bed. Then she hung herself off a beam, having jumped off that old wooden chair, placed exactly in the center of the room. The Cloak. Aaron, in the corner over there, is a regular at the tavern. He's a rogue and usually works independently searching for treasures, whichever way he may. Several years ago, in the evening, Aaron was looking for hidden crypts in the forest area close to one of the elven villages. It began to rain. Suddenly, Aaron saw a blurry image of an elven woman in a long white dress, walking down the middle of the forest road. Aaron had to stop. The woman looked pale, was soaked head to toe, and was shivering. He put his cloak over the woman's shoulders and offered her an escort back home. Without saying anything, she started walking. After a few miles, they reached an elven village. The woman indicated, again, without speaking, that she needed to go into one of the huts. Aaron walked her to the porch and turned around to walk back to the forest. As he realized his cloak was still with her, he looked back, but the woman was already gone. He walked to the door of the hut, and an older elven woman answered. He explained that he had forgotten his cloak from the young woman he had just dropped off at the hut. The woman began crying. She explained to Aaron that her daughter, on this evening, 13 years ago, drowned in the pond by the forest. She was buried in the village cemetery, in the exact same spot Aaron had found her. That same night, Aaron came back to the cemetery to confirm the woman's story. There, on one of the graves, waving in the wind, was Aaron's cloak. That same cloak he is wearing right now. The Little Fluffy Dog. This story was told to me by one of my tavern's most unusual, odd-looking guests. I did not ask where he knew the story from, and frankly, I'd rather not know. Here goes. There lived a lonely old woman. Her only friend was a little fluffy dog who went everywhere with her. The dog loved the fireplace in the winter, and after the old woman went to bed, she would sometimes go and lie in front of the warm coals. Usually, though, the dog slept under the bed. One cold night, the woman was almost asleep when she heard noises outside of her bedroom. She got up to see what was causing the noises, and as she came out her room, the noises stopped. She returned to bed, and as she closed her eyes, she heard the noises again. The old woman got up and turned on the lights. The noise continued, and she kept looking for the source. After searching through her house, she couldn't find anything until she heard that same noise coming from her bedroom. As she carefully entered, slowly opening the door, the noise got louder, and there, in the middle of the room, she found her little fluffy dog playing with one of her toys. The old woman sighed in relief. She could swear she put them away before bed, but oh well, you forget things with old age. She put the toys back into the box. The woman turned out the lights and tried to sleep. She reached down to where the little fluffy dog slept. Sure enough, a warm, wet tongue began to lick her hand. She left her hand dangling off the bed as she turned and settled in comfortably. She opened her eyes for a moment and looked at the fireplace. There, in front of it, sat her little fluffy dog, gazing at the coals and wagging her tail. Down beside the bed, something was still licking her hand. The Poltergeist. On this fine October evening, I had one of my patrons come by the tavern, asking for help with a ghost situation. Introduce yourself.
Zenster.
Alright, Zenster. Tell us more about this ghost.
Before I get into it, you must know my house is located in the Ghost Valley. And I have met my fair share of ghosts, but they never disturbed my family and were mostly friendly. This ghost is different. It interacts directly with my family, especially my young one, Kit. He's just 4 years old. It seems to me this is not even a ghost, and more so an evil spirit that has ill intentions.
So, what has the spirit done?
It started since the beginning of this month. One morning, after just waking up, I was passing by Kit's room on my way to the kitchen to brew some coffee. I heard my wife singing to him. I didn't want to disturb them, so I went to get my coffee, and to my surprise, my wife was in the kitchen. So who was singing to Kit? I ran to his room and there was no one there. Kit was still sound asleep.
Fascinating. But are you sure it was a spirit and not someone just trying to mess with you? Or maybe your imagination flaring up?
Wait, that's not all of it. There were more instances, but yesterday was the last straw. I was tucking Kit into bed and he tells me, "Daddy, check for monsters under my bed." I look underneath for his amusement and see him, another him, under the bed, staring back at me, quivering and whispering, "Daddy, there's somebody on my bed."
Uh-huh.
My heart's racing, palms sweating. I hear creepy laughing on the bed. Slowly look up, and this creature is looking right at me. It has my kid's face, but it's not him. It then laughs loudly and flies right through me. I then took Kit and my wife to our friend's house and made my way to you, Tara, immediately.
I might know that spirit you speak of. Let's go. I know exactly what to do. The ring. This story happened on the royal grounds of the Elven Realm. I find this one sort of funny, in a dark kind of way. The Duchess Vanilla became deathly ill. Her Duke Zirian has tried all sorts of remedies, but nothing worked. Within a couple weeks, Vanilla was declared dead. The funeral was held the following day. That night, a rogue made his way into the funeral. He noted Duchess Vanilla still had her ring on, a ring with a gem that only nobles possess. Its value? More than he could ever dream of. Wanting the ring for himself and thinking no one would find out, he went to the cemetery, unlocked the coffin's lid, opened it, and tried to pry off the ring of Vanilla's finger. Only, it wouldn't budge. So he cut off her finger and pulled the ring off. As he left, he turned around to pick up the lid and screamed at the top of his lungs. He dropped the ring and ran. Duchess Vanilla had awakened, was moaning, and held her severed finger towards him with an evil smile. The rogue ran without turning back. In a state of fright and not able to bear what he saw, he hung himself off a bridge connecting the royal estate to the rest of our lands. If he had only known that Duchess Vanilla actually wanted to thank him. She had not died after all, but had gone into a coma. When he cut off her finger, the pain woke her up. Her and Duke Zirian are still alive and well, thriving in the royal estate lands. The Rest Haven. Last Halloween, these two adventurers came by my tavern. They were on a particularly difficult quest the day before, and it had taken them longer than they'd expected. They were amidst the wild forest as they realized that not only was the sun setting, but it looked as if a very bad thunderstorm was coming. They started hurrying in the hopes that they would make it out of the forest before the storm got really bad, but it was worse than they had thought, and it was approaching fast. There was nowhere to hide. The loud and bright lightning was creeping up on them. As they were accepting the fact that they would likely not survive that night, one of the adventurers noted something among the trees and shouted out,
Look! A hut!
And in fact, there it was. Amidst the wild forest, there stood a small hut with 2 fire torches on both sides. The sign above the door read, Rest Haven. Feeling relieved, the adventurers ran to the hut as quickly as possible. But before they even approached the porch, a white-haired woman answered the door. I've been expecting you, she calmly said. This seemed odd to the adventurers. Nevertheless, the woman had a pleasant, inviting smile and there was nowhere else to go. They entered the hut. The old woman gave them a hot meal and showed them to a warm, cozy room. The furniture was old and worn, but clean. When they awoke in the morning, they were eager to head on their next adventure. They wanted to thank the proprietor, but she was nowhere to be found. They left a note for her with some coins for their stay and left. It was a long way out of the wild forests. The adventurers had to stop for food and drink. Fortunately, my tavern was on their way. As they were telling me about their enjoyable stay at the Rest Haven, I was quite baffled. The Rest Haven had burned down years ago, killing the owner, a white-haired woman. I didn't tell them of my knowledge, but I had to check the location for myself. There was no house. There was no woman. But on the ground, amongst the ashes strangely dry after the storm, lay their note and the coins. The rat problem. By now, you're all familiar with my bard Tay.
Hello there.
Well, how could you not be? He goes out of his way to make himself known, which in turn gains him quite a number of enemies. In his first few months in the wild forest, he sought shelter at my tavern. I let him sleep in the cellar. A lot of wine went missing in those months, by the way.
Guilty as charged.
One night, Tay complained of the scratching noises distracting him from falling asleep. Rats are quite common in our midst, so I had assumed one of them got its way into the cellar. But my locator spell did not point out any rats. The scratching noise had stopped, so I assumed whatever was in the cellar had already gone away. They went back to bed, as did I, to my chambers upstairs. I was deep into trance when all of a sudden I'm awoken by Tay screeching bloody murder. I heard footsteps on the stairs leading up to my chambers. And there stood Tay, with terror in his eyes, holding on to his back. He assumed he got bitten by a rat while he was asleep, but he's been lying on his back the whole time. I took a look at his back and saw a bunch of small red spots oozing blood. That certainly didn't look like a bite. It looked more like a puncture wound. I've seen plenty of those in my time. We went back to the cellar to check Tay's bed. There were several holes in the sheets, and some of the mattress stuffing was showing through them. We flipped the mattress. There was dirt and mud under it, the length of a person, and sticking out of the bottom of the mattress, a knife blade, pointing upwards, towards where Tay slept. We ran outside and saw fresh footprints in the mud, leading to, and then away from the window by the stairs. The scratching sound he heard was the person using the knife blade to dig through the mattress to kill him. It was easy to track the person. They never bothered Tay again.
Yeah, right. But now I owe her, and that's even worse.